Part 1. The church was filled with the soft murmur of guests, the music swelling as my daughter, Emma, made her way down the aisle. She looked stunning in her wedding gown, her face glowing with happiness. My heart swelled with pride, knowing she was about to start the next chapter of her life with the man she loved. But everything changed in an instant. As Emma reached the altar, I felt a cold, jarring interruption. A voice loud, arrogant, and cruel cut through the quiet. It was Greg, the father of Emma's fiancé, standing at the back with a smirk on his face. His words echoed across the room, aimed directly at me, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, it's nice that you could even afford the dress, considering the way you live. But I suppose this is a day you can't mess up. For your daughter's sake, let's hope your pockets hold up." My heart sank. A wave of humiliation crashed over me. I felt all eyes on me, their shocked glances mixed with whispers, some of pity, others of judgment. Greg had humiliated me in front of everyone at my own daughter's wedding, and I could feel the anger rise inside me. But I kept my composure, just long enough to see Emma's reaction. She didn't flinch, not at all. She didn't look at me as if I was a failure. She didn't shrink away. She kept walking toward the altar, though I saw the flash of confusion in her eyes as she tried to make sense of the comment. Greg's words didn't just sting, they shattered something inside me. How dare he belittle me? I had spent years working hard, sacrificing, providing for my family. And now, in one simple sentence, he had questioned everything I had built. Not just my wealth, but my worth. The ceremony continued, but I could barely hear the vows exchanged between Emma and her fiancé. I was consumed with the anger boiling inside me, the humiliation clawing at my chest. I should have stood up and confronted Greg, but I didn't. I couldn't, because I wasn't just some man to be mocked in front of my daughter. I wasn't the fool Greg thought I was. I had a secret that would change everything. One that no one, especially Greg, could have ever imagined. Are you curious about what happened next? How did I turn this entire situation around? Well, stick with me as this story unfolds, because soon enough, Greg's attitude and everything he thought he knew would come crashing down. And let me tell you, when I decided to fight back, I didn't just surprise Greg, I shocked everyone. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. The best is yet to come. Stay tuned for part 2 of this unexpected and thrilling journey. Part 2. The wedding continued, but in my mind, it had already ended. I watched as Emma and her new husband exchanged vows, a part of me proud and happy for her, but another part consumed by what had just happened. Greg had crossed a line, and it was something I would never forget. As the ceremony came to a close and the newlyweds shared their first kiss, I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, but I couldn't. I wasn't going to let Greg's words ruin the most important day of my daughter's life, no matter how much he had tried to make me feel small. I excused myself from the reception, quietly slipping away from the crowd and stepping outside into the cool evening air. The fresh air hit my face like a cold slap, but it didn't help. My mind raced. What did Greg mean by those words? Did he really think I was just some poor, washed-up man who didn't deserve to be part of this family? And how had he become so comfortable disrespecting me in front of everyone? But more than that, something inside me was waking up. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel worthless again, especially not Greg. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just an insult to me. It was an insult to everything I had worked for. And that's when I realized I had the power to change the game. It wasn't about showing Greg up in front of the wedding guests. It wasn't about taking revenge. It was about making him realize who I really was. He thought I was just a guy who worked hard to get by. But he had no idea what I had built in secret. For years, I had kept my wealth hidden from the family. I didn't want to flaunt it. I didn't want anyone thinking I was some kind of big shot. But now, as I stood outside the wedding venue, I realized that Greg had underestimated me in the worst way. And it was time for that to change. I reached for my phone and dialed my lawyer. Jack, I need you to send over the documentation for the family business. You know the one. I need it ASAP. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Samuel, is everything okay? I thought you were at Emma's wedding. Everything's fine, Jack, I said, my voice firm. I just need the papers sent over to me. It's time for the truth to come out. I hung up and leaned against the side of the building, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be fast, but I was going to make sure Greg understood one thing. No one, especially him, could treat me like that and get away with it. Later that evening, as I returned to the reception, I noticed Greg chatting with some of the other guests, acting like nothing had happened. His smug smile was back in place. I wanted to walk over and confront him right then, but I held back. The timing had to be perfect. Instead, I watched him closely. He had no idea what was about to come his way. The night wore on, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. I didn't want to spoil the wedding any more than it had already been, but I wasn't going to let Greg's behavior slide. Finally, the time had come. My lawyer had sent the documents, and everything was in place. I had all the leverage I needed. I walked up to Greg, who turned around at the sound of my footsteps. His smile faded when he saw me standing there, calm and collected. You think you can disrespect me and get away with it? I asked, my voice steady. Greg's expression shifted. What are you talking about, Samuel? You're being dramatic. This was all just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated, my anger rising. You insulted me in front of everyone, Greg. And now I'm going to show you exactly who I am. Without another word, I handed him the legal documents. What's this? He asked, his voice growing more defensive. You're about to find out, I said, my eyes never leaving his. You see, Greg, you thought I was just a man who worked his whole life to get by. But what you don't know is that I'm the owner of the family business, the one you've been trying to steal from us for years. Greg's face went pale as he took in the documents. His fingers trembled as he scanned through the paperwork, his mind racing. He couldn't believe it. The man he had mocked and belittled was the same man who controlled everything. You own the business? Greg stammered. I nodded, my voice cold. I do. And now I'm taking back control. Stay tuned for part 3 as the battle for family ownership escalates. The truth comes out in shocking ways, and Greg has no idea what he's getting himself into. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible moments in this gripping story. Part 3. Greg stood there, the documents trembling in his hand, his face slowly changing from disbelief to realization. His eyes widened as the truth began to sink in. I could see the arrogance draining from him, replaced by a mix of panic and frustration. You lied to me, Greg spat, his voice shaky now. I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving his. No, Greg, you lied to yourself. You thought I was just a man who couldn't stand up for himself. You thought you could push me around, take advantage of my family, and use my daughter's wedding as your stage. But now you know, I'm not the fool you thought I was. He clenched his jaw, trying to regain some of the confidence he had lost. But it was too late. The truth had already been exposed, and Greg was no longer in control. I don't know how this happened, he stammered. I thought I could take over. I had everything planned. You were just supposed to be a small part of the picture. Your plan failed, I said firmly. You underestimated me, and now you're paying the price. Greg seemed to falter. He looked around the room, as if searching for an escape. I wasn't going to let him slip away that easily. You're a disgrace, I continued, my voice cold. You tried to steal from my family, from my daughter's life, and you thought I wouldn't do anything about it. But now, you're going to learn what happens when you cross me." The guests around us had begun to notice the tension building between us. Whispers filled the room as people began to gather, sensing that something was about to unfold. But Greg wasn't done yet. In a last-ditch attempt to salvage his pride, he turned to the crowd, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to secure a future for my family," I scoffed, shaking my head. "By exploiting mine. Is that how you secure a future? By humiliating your own family and then trying to take what isn't yours? You'll never learn, Greg. That's why you're losing everything." A silence fell over the room as the full weight of my words hit him. People were starting to understand the magnitude of the situation. The man who had been the instigator, the one who had so confidently belittled me, was now standing exposed and powerless in front of everyone. Greg's face turned red with anger, but there was nothing he could do now. The leverage was in my hands, and I wasn't going to let him ruin our family's legacy. "I'm done here," I said, taking one last look at him. "You're out of this business, out of this family's life. And if you ever try to pull something like this again, I'll make sure you regret it." Without another word, I turned to leave. Emma was waiting in the corner, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and awe. I walked toward her, and she rushed to meet me. "Dad, what happened?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I smiled softly at her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's over, sweetheart. He's done. And now we move forward together." Her face softened, a look of relief washing over her. You handled him, didn't you?" I nodded. "I did. It's not just about standing up for myself. It's about making sure our family stays strong. We don't let people like him tear us apart." Emma hugged me tightly, and I could feel the weight of the past few days lifting off my shoulders. This wasn't just a victory over Greg. It was a victory for our family. We had stood up for what was ours, and now we could finally move on. Stay tuned for part 4 as the fallout from the confrontation continues. The truth about Greg's betrayal spreads, and there are more secrets yet to be revealed. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the next chapter of this incredible journey. Part 4. The days that followed the confrontation were filled with a mixture of relief and tension. Greg's attempt to take what wasn't his had failed, and I knew that I had won. But something still gnawed at me. His betrayal. The arrogance with which he had treated my family. It wasn't just about the business. It was about respect. And I was determined to make sure that, from now on, he would never forget who he was dealing with. But that night, something unexpected happened. It was late in the evening, and the house was quiet. I had just finished dinner when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my first instinct was to ignore it. But then I saw Emma's face. She looked a little pale, worried even. "Who is it?" I asked, standing up from the table. "I don't know," she said, glancing toward the door. "But I think it's someone from Greg's side. I don't know what they want." My stomach dropped. Could Greg be making one last attempt to salvage his position, to manipulate us back into submission? I walked cautiously to the door and opened it, only to find one of Greg's associates standing there. The man was in his late 40s, well-dressed, but his eyes were weary. "Mr. Anderson," he asked, his voice hesitant. "My name is Marcus. I need to speak with you about something important." I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes. "What's this about?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It's about Greg. He's in trouble, and it involves more than just the business." At those words, my mind immediately went on high alert. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice low and cautious. Marcus hesitated, glancing behind him, almost as if checking to make sure no one was listening. Then he spoke in a quieter voice. "He's made enemies, serious enemies, and now they're coming after him. They're not just interested in the business, they're going after everything. They've already started." And Greg ... He's desperate. I could feel my heart racing. This wasn't just about business anymore. There were real threats at play, and Greg's actions had put us all in danger. I wasn't sure what to make of Marcus's words. Could this be an attempt to manipulate me, or was this real? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Why come to me now?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Because Greg has dug himself a hole so deep he can't get out, and you're the only one who can help him." I stared at him, processing what he had just said. "Help him? After everything he's done?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, because if you don't, things are going to escalate. And not just for Greg, for all of us." The gravity of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. What had Greg gotten himself into? I thought I had won the battle, but now I was hearing that the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Why should I help him?" I demanded. "What's in it for me?" Marcus hesitated before speaking. "If you help him, he'll back off. He'll stop trying to destroy your family's business. You won't have to worry about him anymore. But if you don't, if you turn your back on him now, it's going to get a lot worse. For everyone." I looked back at Emma, who had been standing behind me, listening to the conversation unfold. She looked just as confused and concerned as I felt. I knew she wanted to be rid of Greg, but I could see the fear in her eyes as Marcus's words settled in. "I don't want anything to do with him," she said quietly, shaking her head. "I just want it all to end." I turned back to Marcus, my mind spinning. Could I really help Greg after everything he had done to our family? The humiliation, the betrayal, it was hard to even consider. But something about his desperate situation made me pause. I couldn't just turn a blind eye. As much as I hated Greg, if what Marcus was saying was true, I had to at least consider what was at stake. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice hardening. "But don't come back here unless you have real answers." Marcus nodded, then stepped back. "I'll leave you to think. Just ... remember that time is running out." As he walked away, I stood in the doorway, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I hadn't expected this turn of events. I had thought we were done with Greg, that everything was settled. But now, I was caught in a dangerous game I never asked to play. I turned to Emma, who was still standing in the hallway, her arms crossed. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know you want this all to end, but I can't let things get worse. We need to figure out how to protect ourselves, and if that means helping Greg, then so be it." She sighed, shaking her head. "I don't know what to say, Dad. I just want things to go back to normal." Greg's face twisted with frustration. "I didn't have a choice. You don't understand. These people, they have power, and they wanted something from me. I thought I could control it, but now it's too late." I leaned forward, my voice steady but filled with authority. "You're right about one thing, it's too late. You've made a mess of everything, and now you want me to clean it up." Greg's eyes flickered with guilt. "I know I failed you, but I can't fix this alone. I need your help to get out of this. We both know I can't do it without you." I looked at him, considering his words. Part of me wanted to turn my back on him, to wash my hands of everything he had done. But then I thought about Sarah, about my family, and about how we had gotten to this point in the first place. Greg may have been the one to bring this danger into our lives, but it was up to me to fix it. "I'm not doing this for you," I said firmly. "I'm doing this for Emma, for Lily, for the people who matter most." Greg nodded, his shoulders slumping with a mix of relief and regret. "I understand. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just thought I could get ahead." I stood up, pacing slowly in front of him. "Here's the deal, Greg. You're going to work with me, and you're going to help us take down these people you've been involved with. You're going to clean up your mess, and you're going to make sure my family is safe." Greg didn't argue. He simply nodded, knowing that he had no other option. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said quietly. "I'll make it right." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. I had no idea how deep this situation really went, how far Greg had fallen into the web of crime and corruption. But one thing was certain. I wasn't about to let my family pay for his mistakes. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategies. We had to act fast. Every second counted. The more we learned about the people behind Greg's troubles, the more dangerous it became. But we were ready. At least, I thought we were. We had to use the element of surprise. We had to get to the heart of the operation before it was too late. And with Greg working alongside us, we were in a race against time. Stay tuned for part 6, where the stakes rise and the dangers become clearer. The plan is set into motion, and it's not just Greg who's at risk, it's everyone involved. Don't miss the next chapter in this high-stakes story. Subscribe for more thrilling twists and turns. Part 6, The Trap closes in. The following week passed by in a blur of planning, phone calls, and covert meetings. Every move we made felt like a calculated risk, but there was no turning back. I had committed to this path, and I was going to make sure it was the right one. Greg and I worked side by side, gathering information, reaching out to contacts, and preparing ourselves for the confrontation that would change everything. He had offered his help, but deep down, I knew I couldn't fully trust him. After all, he was the one who had dragged our family into this mess in the first place. But I had to rely on him now. There was no other choice. The plan we devised was simple, but that didn't mean it was without danger. We had to confront the people Greg had been working with, confront them in a way that would force them to back down. We were going to infiltrate their network, gather as much information as possible, and get them to make a mistake. Then we'd expose them. It was a risky move, but it was our only shot at getting out of this alive. Greg had a contact, someone, on the inside of the criminal organization, who was willing to give us a piece of critical information. But we needed to meet in person, somewhere isolated, away from prying eyes. I had my reservations, but there was no time to waste. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Greg as we prepared to leave. Greg looked at me, his eyes a mixture of fear and determination. "I'm not proud of what I've done, Samuel, but this is the only way we can fix things. If we don't get this information, they'll keep coming after us. They'll never stop." I nodded grimly, not trusting the situation, but knowing that we had no other option. We couldn't afford to fail. We arrived at the meeting point, a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was run down, the windows broken, and the door creaked ominously as we pushed it open. Inside, it was dark and empty, the only sound coming from the echo of our footsteps. I glanced around warily. This was no place for a conversation, but we had no choice. We had to meet. Greg motioned for me to follow him as we walked toward the back of the warehouse. In the shadows, a figure emerged, a tall man with a hood pulled low over his face. His posture was stiff, guarded. He didn't look like someone I wanted to trust. "Is this the guy?" I asked Greg, my voice low. Greg nodded. "This is Tony. He knows everything." I took a deep breath and approached Tony, trying to keep my nerves in check. "What do you have for us?" Tony didn't speak at first. He just looked at Greg, then back at me, sizing us up. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're in over your head," he said, "but I'll help you. But first, you need to understand something. These people don't care about your family. They don't care about anything but their own power." I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the anger that flared up inside me. "Just tell me what you know." Tony paused, glancing nervously around the room. "They've been watching you, watching both of you, and they know you're coming for them. That's why they're preparing something big, a move that will put an end to this for good." "Preparing what?" I demanded, feeling a cold sweat run down my spine. Tony hesitated again, clearly hesitant to give us the full picture. They've been laundering money through your company for months. The only reason you haven't noticed is because it's hidden under layers of legitimate transactions, but it's all about to come crashing down. They're ready to cut their losses, and they'll do whatever it takes to stay in control. I felt my blood run cold. This was bigger than I thought. These people weren't just after the business. They were after everything I had built. And if they were going to destroy us, they weren't going to stop at just me or Greg. They would go after my family, my legacy, everything I held dear. Tony handed me a flash drive. This has everything, he said. The money trail, the names, the transactions, everything you need to take them down. I took the drive, my hands shaking. This was it. This was the key to bringing them down. But just as I was about to speak, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. My heart dropped. We weren't alone. Tony's eyes widened. They're here. They know. Before I could react, the door slammed open, and several men stormed in. They were armed, their faces cold and determined. We knew you'd try something like this, one of them sneered, pointing a gun at Greg. I stepped in front of Greg instinctively, my heart racing. You don't have to do this, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We have the evidence. We'll expose everything. The man's laugh was cold, mocking. You think you can stop us? You've already lost. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the situation bearing down on me. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about survival. My family's survival. I glanced at Greg. We have to get out of here, I said, my voice low. Now. Stay tuned for part 7 where the danger intensifies. Can we escape unscathed? Or is it too late? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe and stay updated for more. Part 7, The Escape. The tension in the air was palpable. The men, armed and clearly determined, moved closer, their eyes locking onto me and Greg. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to find some way out of this before things escalated further. I felt a hand on my shoulder, Greg's hand. He was shaking, but he wasn't backing down. We can't just let them win, he muttered, his voice tight with fear. I nodded. We're not going to let them win, but we need a plan. Just as the words left my mouth, I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. The approaching sirens were our lifeline. The sound that signaled help was on its way. But would it be enough? The armed men turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. I saw an opening. I knew this was our chance. Now, I shouted, grabbing Greg's arm and pulling him toward the back exit. We ran, as fast as we could, knowing that if we hesitated for even a second, we might not make it. The sirens were closer now, but I didn't know if it was the police or just a random patrol. Either way, we had to move. We burst through the back door of the warehouse, the cool night air hitting our faces. I barely had time to register the sound of footsteps behind us before I felt a sharp pain in my side. One of the men had followed us, and now he was gaining ground. Faster, Greg shouted, pushing me forward as we darted down the alley. We turned a corner, and I spotted an old sedan parked nearby. Without a second thought, I grabbed the door handle, yanked it open, and threw myself into the driver's seat. Get in, I yelled at Greg, who was still several paces behind me. He rushed toward the car, slamming the door just as a gunshot rang out. I felt a sharp sting in my shoulder as the bullet grazed past me, but I didn't stop. I slammed the car into gear and sped off, tires screeching against the pavement. Behind us, the sound of sirens grew louder. We were on the run, but at least we were free for now. We didn't stop until we were miles away. The flashing lights of the police finally in the rearview mirror. My heart was racing, and I could feel the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The danger wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of victory. We had escaped. We pulled into a small, secluded parking lot outside a diner, and I killed the engine. I took a deep breath and turned to Greg, who was sitting beside me, his face pale but alive. "What now?" Greg asked, his voice shaky. I looked at him, trying to process everything. We had just made it out of that warehouse alive, but I knew that was just the beginning. We had the evidence now, but the people after us weren't going to let it go easily. "We fight," I said, my voice steady. "We expose them, and we make sure they never come near us again." Greg nodded, a hint of determination in his eyes. "I won't run anymore. I'll help you." The next few days were a blur of meetings with law enforcement and finalizing the evidence we had. Every step felt like a race against time. The people we were up against were ruthless, but now we had the upper hand. Greg, who had been nothing but a liability before, was starting to show signs of redemption. He wanted to make things right. He knew the stakes, and he wasn't about to back down. But it wasn't just about taking down those responsible for everything. It was about securing a future for my family, ensuring that the people who tried to destroy us would never succeed. The battle was far from over. We still had enemies to face, and there were dangers around every corner. But one thing was clear: I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. Stay tuned for part 8 as the final confrontation looms. Will we succeed in taking down our enemies, or will they strike back harder than ever before? Subscribe to stay updated and follow the journey. Part 8, the final confrontation. The air was thick with tension. My mind raced as we made our way toward the final confrontation. It had been days since we escaped the warehouse, but it felt like a lifetime. Every corner I turned, I was looking over my shoulder, anticipating an attack. Greg and I were no longer just fighting for control of the business. We were fighting for our lives. We had gathered everything we needed to expose the people who had been manipulating us. The evidence was irrefutable, but I knew that the moment we made our next move, there would be no going back. Greg sat across from me, his face weary but determined. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "They won't stop. We know they have the resources to make this disappear." I looked at him, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. "They've already underestimated us, Greg, and that's their biggest mistake. We fought too hard to back down now." I could see the fear in his eyes, but there was something else too, a spark of hope. He had been with me through everything, and now, after all the pain and betrayal, we were standing on the edge of the final battle. The decision was made. We would present the evidence, go public, and make sure these people paid for everything they had done. But there was one thing we hadn't planned for: their counterattack. We met with the authorities and handed over all the files, everything we had gathered. The police were already putting together a case, and the FBI had gotten involved. But just as things were moving in our favor, we got a call that would change everything. "Samuel, we've got a problem," the officer said on the other end of the line. "They know you're planning to expose them. They're moving faster than we expected. You need to act fast." I looked at Greg, my heart racing. This was it. If we didn't act now, we would lose everything we had worked for. "We need to move on this now," I said, my voice firm. "Get the word out. We'll fight back, but we're not backing down." I could hear the tension in the officer's voice as he replied, "We're ready. You'll have backup, but you have to be careful. These people are dangerous." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. "We'll be careful, but we'll finish this." The next few hours felt like an eternity. We drove to the designated location where we were supposed to meet the authorities, but something felt off. The streets were quieter than usual. My instincts told me we were being watched. We arrived at the building, a quiet corner of the city, and parked. I could see the flashing lights of unmarked cars in the distance. They were there, ready to back us up. Greg and I stepped out of the car, my mind alert and on edge. This was it, the moment that would define everything. But then, just as we reached the door, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I gasped, looking down to see a blood stain spreading across my shirt. Someone had shot me. "Get down," Greg shouted, pulling me behind the cover of the car. I could barely think straight as the world around me spun. The pain was sharp, but I knew we couldn't stop. We had come too far to be taken down now. Greg pulled out his phone and called for backup. "We're under attack. We need help now." I could hear gunfire in the distance as the sound of sirens grew louder. The police were closing in, but would they get here in time? With everything going on, I had to make a choice. I could either retreat, let the police handle this and hope we survived, or I could fight back, give it everything I had, and make sure they never had a chance to harm my family again. I chose to fight. As the officers arrived, Greg and I worked together to make sure the criminals were contained. It was a battle, one that involved every ounce of energy and resolve I had left. There were more shots fired, and for a moment, I thought we might lose. But then, everything changed. The police swarmed the area, taking control. The criminals were arrested one by one. The moment I had feared for so long, the moment when everything could have been lost, was over. We had won, not just the battle, but the war. The people who had tried to destroy us were now behind bars, and the truth had been exposed for the world to see. As we stood outside, watching the authorities take the criminals away, I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders. My family was safe, the business was safe, and Greg, who had once been the enemy, was now standing beside me, a man who had redeemed himself. "We did it," Greg said, his voice quiet. "We did," I replied, a sense of relief washing over me. But there was one last thing I had to do. I turned to Greg, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. "You've earned my respect. You've proven that you're willing to do the right thing. For that, you'll always be family." Stay tuned for the next chapter, as Greg and I rebuild what was lost and prepare for the future. This battle may be over, but the journey is just beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated. With the criminals behind bars, our family and business were finally safe. Justice prevailed,